And right now we'll be heading over down under in Australia, where there's an election going on. And we'll be focusing on the Muslim electorate, the Muslim communities, and of course, all the justice minded voters, if I can put it that way. Well, they are facing a very, very critical question when it comes to this year's elections. How long do they keep supporting political parties that consistently fail to represent Muslim values? When do they say enough is enough? There seems to be a lot of frustration that is growing amongst the Muslim electorate in Australia, frustration on Palestine and how the government has been responding to it, frustration on civil liberties and racial justice. But many voters still feel trapped, afraid that stepping away from the major political parties might make things worse. Something almost similar to what we're experiencing here in South Africa, although there was a bit of a shift in the latest elections. So today we ask, is this fear justified, or is it time to fundamentally rethink, how they engage with power, and ultimately how influential will the Muslim vote be? How lucrative will it be in Australia this time around? And to help us unpack this is Australian academic and humanitarian Fadlullah Wilmot, who's been at the forefront of these critical conversations. Fadlullah, welcome to News and Views on Salam Media. Thank you so much for joining us. And how's it? How's Brisbane?
Brisbane is fine. We're getting towards autumn now, so it's cooling down a bit.
No, proper. It's almost approaching winter in this side of the
Yeah.
world. But Fadlullah, before we get into the nitty gritties of this conversation, let's set the scene for our listeners first. Australia's Labour Party has long positioned itself as almost being the lesser evil compared to the Liberals, especially under figures like Peter Dutton, whose record on refugees, on surveillance and Islamophobia can be somewhat troubling. But on the article that you wrote, you argue that both parties have crossed red lines, especially when you look at Gaza and some of the ASIO powers to offshore detention. Can you just set the scene for us up on how things are looking, especially looking at the polls and the elections in Australia at this current moment?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this chance to talk to people in South Africa. I've been to South Africa. I admired the Muslim community in South Africa for a long time, and we have a lot of South Africans here in Brisbane, in Australia. The forthcoming elections are heating up, and the Muslim community has come to realize, many in the Muslim community, not all, have come to realize that the two-party duopoly, like the two-party duopoly in the UK, Conservative and Labour, like the Democrats and the Republicans in America, the Conservative Party here is called Liberal, and the Labour Party is still the Labour Party here. Both of these parties have not really passed the ethical test when it comes to Gaza. They both of them have. You may say that Labour is doing less bad than Dutton would be, the leader of the Liberal Party, but neither of them have really stood up and said, "Look, this is genocide. We support the taking of Israel to the International Court of Justice. We condemn genocide. We don't want to send our weapons." None of them have done that. And neither party have three bills were presented to Parliament. The genocide risk reporting bill, requiring defense companies to report genocide risks in their supply chains. The divesting from illegal settlements bill, which would prevent Australia funds from supporting businesses in illegal Israeli settlements, and the Defence Trade Controls Amendment Bill, banning arms export linked to genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity. Neither of the major political parties has stood up and supported this bill.
I want to just get some insight on the Muslim electorate. What's of priority to them? I think here in South Africa, we had our elections late last year, and there seemed to be a power struggle between political parties' reaction to internal affairs, things like service delivery, passing of legislation, and all of that, but also the response when it comes to what's happening internationally. What's of priority to the Muslim electorate in Australia right now? Is the focus on internal affairs, what the party's doing at home, things that maybe affect them directly on a day-to-day basis, or what happens externally, like the response to Gaza, as you mentioned, is also of equal, if not more, priority?
We have worked out 14 questions that we sent to every single candidate in the electorate, and we also have sent questions to every single party. And these consist of things like housing, like medical care, like gambling, like alcohol, like and including Gaza. So our focus is not purely on Gaza. I think Gaza was a wake-up call to the Muslim community which made them realize that the major political parties were not taking any notice of their particular concerns. I think that it was a wake up call to them. But basically, we want to engage the Muslim community in the political process, and to strengthen national unity and promote a policy making based on values, based on principles. So this is what we're trying to work on. It's not purely on Gaza, but Gaza was a wake up call to us.
Mm, mm, mm. Um, Fadlullah, from what I'm gathering, many Muslim and progressive voters in Australia seem to feel almost trapped between Labour and the coalition. Afraid that maybe abandoning one will empower the other. Do you think this fear is still justified, or it's time to break that circle? I'm correlating it again to what's happening here in South Africa, where there's been a lot of talks about people preferring to stick with the current, African National Congress, or risk giving the power to some of the quote unquote smaller parties like the DA and EFF. But then the response to that question on this front would be, when both, major parties fail on some of the core issues, at what point do communities owe it to themselves to break free?
I think I'm not sure of the system in South Africa, but if you look at the Anglosphere, there are two major political parties, and they differ very little in their policies. Biden will bomb Gaza with a smile.
Mm,
Trump will do it with a frown. So it's no real difference between the two. Um, Labour on immigration, on defence, uh, with this huge expenditure on nuclear-powered submarines, which are going to be a huge detriment to Australian social services. So neither party is really it. So we have made a principled decision that we would like to see a hung parliament in Australia,
mhm.
which means that minor progressive parties like the Greens and like some other independents will hold the balance of power, which will enable us to hold the Labour Party to account. It's not a perfect system. We're not operating in a perfect system, but this would enable us to have make our voice heard and improve the situation.
Mm, mm, mm. I
So
wanted to check. Yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead.
Okay, I want to bring the conversation to the voting system in Australia, which allows what one might consider smaller parties and independent candidates to influence policy. But from what I'm gathering, many Australians still treat politics as a two-horse race. You've mentioned the parallels, with the United States of America, and how they vote in that part of the world. How can, communities start shifting that mindset and actually make alternatives a viable option?
Okay, I think number one, we have to realize that we as a Muslim community have to vote on principles, and we are an ummah that has principles, and we have to vote on principles. In Australia, we have compulsory registration of voters. We have
Hmm.
compulsory voting. Everybody must vote. If you don't vote, you are fined. And we have a preferential system. So if your first preference doesn't get the 50% of votes in order to win the election, then your votes will go to your number two. And those votes are distributed until somebody gets 50% of the votes. So we have a much better system than America or the UK, where you have the first past the post system, which means that, for example, the Labour Party won the election in the UK with a huge majority, but actually the number of votes they got is not in proportion with the number of with the number of seats they won in Parliament. That doesn't happen in Australia. So we
Mm.
have a better system of election, and that allows smaller parties to play a role. And we have a Senate in Australia, which is voted statewide. The billionaires and the fossil fuel companies are really scared of the advance of independence and the Greens in Australia, and they've got $50 million war chest in order to use their propaganda and media against the minor political parties.
Mm.
Um, that's the system in Australia.
Mm. I want to touch on, some influential figures that we've seen come out in recent times. For instance, Daylin Fowler. There's also Mahrin Farouki in the Senate. They're active in the Senate, and they kind of prove that outsiders can shift the system, if I can put in those words. What
Yes.
lessons can or should Australian Muslims and maybe allied voters take from such successes?
The point that Australian Muslims need to realise, and which the Muslim Votes Matter is trying, we have examined every political party in Australia, every single candidate in Australia, based on their public statements, on the answers to questions, what are their positions, and we have rated them and we have given our advice to Muslims to the preferential votes. And so we have put mostly the independents, the Greens, above the major political parties. So we're advising Muslims, you can make your voice heard, even if we don't win. If we
Mm,
reduce the margin of victory of one of the major of either of the major political parties, they will have to listen to us in the
mm,
future. They will realize that going against the community wishes has a consequence. And interesting enough, even though we call ourselves Muslim Votes Matter, we have many non-Muslims supporting us.
mm, mm,
So we have many Christians who looked at our policies and said, "You're talking about politics with principles," and they are supporting us.
mm,
And
mm,
also we have Senator Payman, from who was originally from Afghanistan. She has formed her own political party, which is called Australia Voice, and she is running candidates in the Senate.
mm, mm, mm. And I think you just encroached on my next question, because I wanted to touch specifically on that, on solidarity, because I don't think the conversation in Australia is just about Muslims. You have the issues of the Aborigines people, the First Nations people. There's climate activists and refugee advocates who are also seemingly fed up about the status quo and the major political parties. And my question to that is there real solidarity? Is there a real chance to build a united front that can force change from a varying electorate?
Yes, Muslim Votes Matter is working together with various forces, political forces. But we're not a political party. We're
Mm,
advising. We're a political advocacy group, a political education group that is looking at the policies and saying, this is how we suggest you vote, and this is how we suggest you allocate your preferences. And in many cases we're supporting the Greens. In some cases we're supporting independence. In some cases we're supporting Australia Voice. So, and we've looked at the strategy of how the preferences flow. So we're trying to show that we're working together with other concerned people in the community about climate, about the First Nations people, about refugees, uh, and both political parties, the major political parties, have endorsed the very draconian anti-migrant policies.
mm, mm. And just lastly, before I let you go, Fadlullah, you mentioned something about a hung parliament,
Yes.
where neither major party has full control, and how that could maybe be a good thing. Can you maybe expand on that, and what it means, and in literal terms, how it would see a
Okay.
change in governance in Australia?
Okay. If neither political party wins 51% of the votes, that means they will have to depend on minor parties for support. The hope is that the Labour Party will not get a full majority, and they will have to depend on Greens and independent political parties, for independents and other minor parties, for support to get policies through. We have seen the positive outcomes of that when it came to housing. The
Hmm.
Greens managed to force the government to accept much better policies on housing and on climate change. So there is the fact that the major party does not have the majority either in the lower house or in the Senate means they have to negotiate. And they will have to, it is not a perfect system. We won't get everything we want, but we are moving the direction in a way that will benefit the whole community, and which will improve Australia's foreign policy. And don't forget, Australia
Mm,
is living, our biggest next door neighbor is Indonesia, the biggest Muslim majority country in the world. Why should we be adopting policies that support a genocidal regime in Israel when our neighbors are feeling aghast at this
mm,
sort of behavior? So
no, definitely. Yeah.
a better policy on Israel would put Australia in a much better position with its immediate neighbors, Indonesia and Malaysia, for example.
No, definitely. I think a very, very important point that you're making, Fadlullah. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you so much
Okay.
for
No, thank
giving
you.
us your
It's very
time.
nice to hear from you. And when I'm in South Africa again, I hope we meet up.
Hopefully, definitely will. Thank you so much. That was Fadlullah Wilmot coming to us from Brisbane in Australia, where, yeah. The Australian Muslims are mobilizing for political power in the upcoming elections. Is getting heated up, and it's going to be interesting which side of the coin they vote for. Fadlullah seems to think that a hung parliament would be something that's of good. It would be a good result where neither major party has full control, and it would force a lot of compromise with progressive independence. Do you agree? Do you think that's the way to go? We seem to be having a taste of that here in South Africa with the GNU and how that is panning out. So, is that maybe the future? Because yeah, the world is becoming increasingly polarized. There's no solution or one blanket solution, to a lot of issues, and there seems to be a need for varying opinions when it comes to governance, and just a one political party approach. Seems to be losing a lot of steam in a lot of democracies across the world. And South Africa is getting a taste of that. And it looks like the best option, according to Fadlullah, for Australians right now would be exactly that, a hung parliament where neither party has a majority, and issues are going to be resolved on a voting based kind of scenario, instead of a one political party just going, okay, this is our policy, and it says this is how we're going to be reacting or responding, to whatever that is thrown at us. So yeah, really interesting times. We're going to take a quick break. News and Views is going to continue after this.